right, everybody, it's time. Welcome, everybody, to the rockingest party that none of us ever wanted to be invited to. A celebration of a man whose departure on the 1st of July was so seismic that we will mark that date with picnics, parades, and fireworks forever. Okay. Gareth Douglas Carter. Say it with me. Gareth Douglas Carter. Chant it. Matter. That's it. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, there's good energy to that one, but there's something a bit weird about the cadence. So try this one. G, 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 G. That's right. That's right. Gareth Carter. Big G, the original man with the knife. My name is Liam. I knew Gareth for 30 years. We were friends for about 26 of them, not always consecutively. But we always brought it back to the love, because no matter what, I couldn't imagine my life without G in it. And I still can't, and I know that many of you feel the same way. And today we're going to figure out a way to get through it together. I'm no expert, but I think the most obvious path is the path of love. Love of family, love of friends, love of good food, love of a couple of pints, love of a couple more pints, love of friendly competition, love of discovery, love of G. And an appreciation for the love he gave us in his own unique and sometimes impenetrable way. What I hope we're going to do together today is answer the eternal question, why? Not why did this happen? Only the universe can answer that, and she ain't talking. Well, she is talking, but I can't figure out how to decode it yet. Patrick Keeney's going to help me with that. Now, the question is somewhat less grand, but very relevant. Why are there so many people here today? Why are there so many people watching on the YouTube stream? Why did G's departure leave such a sharp and painful void in all our lives? Why was he such a magnet for our love, and why was he such a beacon to share his hope? To answer that question, I think we need to ask another question. Who exactly was G? What did he believe? How did he make his decisions? Who did he love and admire more than anyone? Why? We start to understand that, and maybe we can answer the original question. Who was G? Who is G? Or maybe we can't, you know, as Julie said, so perfectly in that really nice article that was calling today a few weeks ago. He's always been sort of out of the norm. He was always a little rough around the edges. But so kind and so warm. A storyteller, a family man, and a bit mysterious. There was lots behind him that people never really knew about. Well, today, we're going to unravel some of that mystery. And over the next hour or so, we're going to hear from some of the people who meant the most to Gareth. They represent different parts of his life and different eras. They have their own unique perspective on why G meant so much to us, and we're going to welcome our first guest in just a moment. But before we do, I just want to make a couple of introductions. We are all connected, obviously, first of all, because we're all alive. Secondly, connected by our love for G. I just want to make sure everybody knows who's who. His loving and ever-patient wife, Julie McDonald Carter. His strapping young lad, Reese Carter. Beautiful and adored daughter, Sky. His rambunctious brother, Kevin, and his daughter, Alicia. His dad, Phil, and Phil's wife, Maggie. Aunt Sue and all the Dingles. I learned at G's wedding, don't make fun of the name Dingle. And of course, we have Julie's family. We have the matriarch, Pat McDonald. Julie's oldest brother, Scott. Wife Julia and daughter Nez couldn't be here, but we know they're with us in spirit. Julie's brother Steve, his wife Jackie, and their daughters Roxy and Asha. Now, did I miss anyone that's special? Is there anyone here who thinks they're special and deserves an introduction? Okay.
He's not here.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of not here, there are a couple people that aren't here. Julie's brother Duff and his wife Joey, unfortunately not able to make it. A little bit of regulatory burden along the way. Dave Foster was not able to make it. Those of you that know Dave Foster will be shocked to learn he had an issue with some border restrictions and couldn't make it over himself. And nobody's watching. We know that he's 4 beers ahead of all of us, so keep it up, Buster. It's going to be a long night. A great friend, mentor to all of us, especially G, who we lost maybe 10 or 11 years ago, Dr. Don McDonald. And of course, also not here, we just lost a couple of years ago, G and Kevin's beloved mother, Barb, who is watching the proceedings today much as she watched G's life with a mixture of horror and delight. And for all the people watching on YouTube, we're really glad you're here. We've already started to comment, and that's great. Gives you a way to participate. Rob Wise, sending love from Portugal. Thanks for that. Hyperbole, whoever you are, we send love to you too. Tell us what it is that you're cooking. Brian Sharp, why did you delete the first message that you posted? Wherever you're watching from, we're glad that you're here. And don't hesitate to put a couple of notes in the chat, and we'll try to get your name involved in the ceremony. And ceremony sounds so formal, doesn't it? We'll get your name out, and we'll make sure that the family has a copy of everything that everybody submitted. And if you're wondering, oh, how do you see that thing that's on YouTube, just search Gareth Carter Remembered on YouTube, and it should pop right up. A few special thanks, obviously. Number one, the proprietors, the owners, the visionaries behind this great and inspiring venue, Brent and Gillian. Would have been totally structured without them, as you said, because it'd be kind of hard to find a place to fit this many people, and we are, in case you're worried about it, we are well under the capacity for this venue, even under the current restrictions. I want to thank all the staff that's working here totally on a volunteer basis, led by Ashley Kennedy. You know, one of the secrets that you're worried about making too long and stuff like that, is just leave the bar open the whole time. So the bar is open the whole time. If you feel the need to get up and get another pint, that's cool. You would probably be disappointed if you didn't. But just because the beers are free doesn't mean you shouldn't tip the bartenders. Remember that when you're up there. You're at too many suppliers of the food and the wine to name. We appreciate all of you. You know who you are. But the one that really impressed me the most was our friends at Creemore, who donated all the beer for this event. That is some kind of achievement. Memorial service, all the beer gets donated by the brewer. And it's an especially generous gesture, given they had to lay off half their staff on July 2nd. Now, I want to do a quick little bit of interaction, just because I notice there's a lot of people here that I don't know. I just want to get a sense of how everybody here knows G. So I'm just ask you to put your arm up and read a few different categories. If you have more than one, just put your arm up again. You know, G wasn't big into recipes and measurements, so no worries about that. If you're part of G's immediate family, raise your hand. Part of G's extended family, raise your hand. You're one of G's, part of G's in-law family, raise your hand. If you're part of the Aurora crowd from way back, raise your hand. If you met G later in life, like your 20s or 30s, put up your hand. You met G in Collingwood, put up your hand. If you've ever been a client of G, put up your hand. If you've ever eaten something G made, put up your hand. If you've ever had a pint with G, put up your hand. If you've ever had a couple of pints with G, put up your hand. Okay, I knew it. We really all do have lots in common. Okay, so we're going to explore who G was. Our speaker is going to take us through that, but I just want to share a couple thoughts before we start. It's sometimes helpful when you're trying to figure out who someone or something was, figure out what they were not. Right? So, and before I start going into that, I just want to put out a blanket apology on behalf of all the speakers. If any of the language that you hear gets insulting, we will all be speaking freely from the heart, so we might not have time to catch ourselves. We apologize in advance, and we hope that the delegate among you won't take too much offense. And I'm talking to you, Rob Saley, goddammit. So who was G not? Who wasn't G? That's a very awkwardly written sentence, but forget the linguistics. One thing G definitely was not was a phony. He was absolutely incapable of being anyone other than who he was. And you know, I think this is one of the most remarkable things about him, because when you think about it, we all have our masks, right? Not the ones we've been wearing for the past 18 months. I'm talking about the masks that cover our whole face. The ones that we wear to work, the mask we wear around our family, the mask we wear when we're out in public, the masks that really we use to camouflage our true selves. And sometimes we forget that we're even wearing them, and then we're really in trouble because you kind of forget who you are. So G had one mask, had two positions, a curious mask and the thinking about it mask. I can pretty much guarantee you that no matter what the circumstance of your friendship with G or the duration or the context, the G you knew is pretty much the G he was. And the interesting thing about being around someone that doesn't have a collection of masks is that you tend to drop yours too, right? You get closer, you build trust, you share more. You really know that person and everything that makes them them, and they know you. And that really is the road to love, and it's an incredibly precious and rare thing. Now, it sounds great, being true to yourself and all the rest, but boy, there were times when maybe you wished you would have pretended, acted just a little bit, right? Should you really wear those work boots to the gala premiere? When you're concerned that a client's request may be too late to fulfill, should you really tell him to go shit in his hat? But then, you know, on a few occasions I did see him try to pretend it didn't work out for him or the people he was with, and I'll just give you one quick example. So I got to know G totally accidentally. I met him when I was living in Kingston through another couple of close pals of mine and his, Chris Manchop and Matt McPherson. Matt will be up here shortly, in fact. And so, you know, I'll just say it. G and I didn't hit it off. We did have some things in common. We're both big boys, and that's a special fraternity that most of you know nothing about. We both grew up in heavily British households, G because his family is Welsh, and me because my parents are from Glasgow, right, lad? And we both had jobs that centered around digging holes. Me with swimming pools, and G with his work at Highland Memorial Gardens. So that wasn't enough. It wasn't like outright hostility between us, not at that point anyway, but we just didn't connect. And as they say in Spain, a country that G loved to visit, c'est la vie. Then in 1993, maybe 2 years after we first met, another close friend, Mike Alexander, invited me to drive to Florida for reading week, stay at his parents' place. In the car would be me, Mike, Mike's cousin Marnie, and G, who I'd met, and so G had met maybe 3 times in the previous 2 years. I didn't hit it off, remember that. There's no better way, for good or ill, to get to know somebody than on a 24-hour drive. Right? So for reasons that escape me, we left Kingston at midnight on a Tuesday. We drew straws and I got the first driving shift. So naturally, G and Mike proceeded to get blindingly drunk at my house on University Avenue. So we got to the border around 12:30, there again. No reason to be suspicious, right? Car full of kids, middle of the night on a weekday. 2 of them drunk is the metaphor of your choice. So the border guard eyes us up. And he goes around the car, you know, ID please. You know, what do you do for a living? So Marnie and I had no problem. Miraculously, Mike Alexander was able to get his shit together. And then the border guard comes to G. And he says, what do you do for a living? G says, lemon herring. And the border guard says, what? He goes, lemon herring, working in the cemetery. The guy says, I don't understand. G looks at him and says, I'm a fucking grave digger. Pull into Bay 5, please. Somewhere on some secret US server is a map of every hair and mole on G's body. Because they looked at all of it. But they didn't find anything on him or anyone else, and off we went. And that was the start of my one phase of an actual friendship with G, which 8 hours later was put to the test when I had to put up $300 to bail him out of jail. Because it turns out that in Virginia, if you're going 25 miles an hour over the speed limit, that's called careless driving. And this wasn't a follow me to the station so we can take your check. It was a get in the back of the car, please. So I have a picture of it, and out of deference to recent Sky, I chose not to submit that photo for the display here today. An act of maturity that shocked my beautiful wife, Jennifer. But I do have it if you want to see it later. Which reminds me of another thing that G wasn't, right? He was not a funny guy, not in the traditional sense, right? Like a man chop, you know, the one-liners at the ready 24/7. But G was a hilarious guy, an endless source of laughs, really, because of the situations that he found himself in. Right? The border, the arrest, getting ready to set off for a long-planned 6-month trip to Australia, breaking his leg playing football 2 days before he was supposed to depart, and going anyway. He always said that the best way to get picked up hitchhiking is to have a cast and crutches. He's setting up a lounge complete with a couch, lamps, and fridge, and a rented storage unit, so he always had a place to have his me time. Which, as many of you know, was sorely needed.
but what about telling a reporter for a local newspaper that the problem with doing a pig in the smoker was that, quote, it looks like I got caught in a barn fire, but the inside is luscious. That's what made G so funny, his situations and his reactions to them. And you know, in the course of our entire friendship, I can only remember one time that he came up with a zinger off the top of his head. So my son Joe was just a few months younger than Reese, and when the boys were young, I mean like 3 or 4, we started going on some road trips down to the US. And you know, it's funny, one of my big regrets is that we never did a trip with Sky and my daughter Violet, because G and I had talked about it a lot. We did a few with the boys. But I remember the first trip, we wanted to take the kids to the old Yankee Stadium, which was in its last year before they moved to a new one across the street the year after that. So we're going to stay at Duff's place, get him in on the party. It's actually not a great idea sometimes, but to be transparent, the ball game was what I wanted to do. G was only interested in this trip because he wanted to go to this barbecue restaurant run by some celebrity chef. But for the life of me, I cannot remember what the name of that celebrity chef was. Does anyone have any idea who G would have liked as a celebrity chef? I know it wasn't Bobby Flay. I had to go to another one of his restaurants another time. What was that?
Anthony Bourdain.
No, it was not Anthony Bourdain, but that's a good guess. No, it was not Guy Fieri. He had 3 names, I know that. Well, this crowdsourcing thing doesn't work after all. Anyways, we got this camper van to go on the trip. And so just as an aside, if you're ever thinking of renting a camper van, and it says that it sleeps 4, it does not. And you say, that's fine, I'll sleep outside, it won't rain, if it does, the awning will keep me dry. It does not. It did have a toilet though, which is helpful when you have little kids. So we're driving down the highway listening to the local newscast. We're somewhere like near Skinnetalese, New York. They're doing the weather and the announcer says there'll be a warm wind in the evening. And G perks up and he says, a warm wind in the evening? That sounds like something you can tell your doctor about. It'll come to you in a second. You know, telling that story of that particular road trip reminds me of something else that G was not. And I can understand if you know, you can't be blamed for sometimes getting a different impression, but he's not an angry guy. Quite the opposite. He was entirely about love, family, food, all the things it said on the invitation. That was all true. And you know, in all the time that I knew him, I only saw him truly mad, 3 times. Like, I mean really mad, near a rage. Like, I'm not talking a little pissy, right? I saw that more than 3 times, maybe 1,003. So, and two of those times were on that trip. So one of them was at that restaurant. Turns out it was in Chelsea, not far from Duff's old place, if you know where that is. And it was attached to a place called Scores, which, to my surprise, was not a sports bar. So we walk up, we're covering the boys' eyes so they don't see what's going on. Or I was anyway, because G had a different focus, right? His rib radar was going off big time. He was locked on 3 greens, beep, beep, beep. He knew where the ribs were. So we order the food comes out, and G has some sort of issue with the wings. And I don't, the wings were too tangy or not tangy enough, who knows? So he gets into it with the waiter, right? And then the cook comes out, and they're getting into it. And they have this long, heated conversation about the way this place serves his wings. It all settles down, and the waiter and the cook depart. And G is still seething. And I said to him, man, was that really worth getting so upset about? And he came back with one of his all-time quotes. He said, I'm not upset, I'm pissed off. They comped the wings. So the next day there was another one. Somehow or another, this camper van had sprung a leak. I'm not down on the camper van. I'm not up on camper vans, in case you haven't noticed. So it sprung a leak of some kind. And I'm driving, so I could see liquid flowing out the side. And we're leaving a trail through the leafy streets of Bronxville, New York, where Duff was living at the time. Just very chic. I pulled over on the main street, and by then it's like a spray coming out, a fine mist. So I said, you get out there and assess the situation. And he says, well, why do I have to do it? And I said, well, you started this trip. The very first thing you said was your driver's license expired and I had to do all the driving. So it's your responsibility. So he begrudgingly gets out and he kneels down in the growing puddle on the street. My son Joe was not long after 3 at this time, but what happened next is truly one of his most earliest and endearing memories. So G scrunches down and puts his finger in the puddle, right? Lifts it to his nose and gives it a sniff. There's a long pause. He looks up and he goes, it's piss! When they tell you the toilet works, it doesn't. He was mad at me about that. I can't remember why. Oh, because it might need to get the camper van. Oh yeah, and the only other time I saw G truly mad, everyone familiar with the show Downton Abbey? Heard of it at least? Yeah? So G and I spent a lot of time needling each other very successfully, and certainly more than was healthy. And that's the thing, like when you throw away the masks, you get to know the whole person, they get to know the whole you. You think about it, there aren't really that many people that know the whole you. Now before I make my ride home very uncomfortable, let me just say G was that for me. Right? So, when I was younger, and thinner, and maybe had a bit more zeal, people used to say I resembled Tim Robbins. And G knew that I never really loved that comparison because it's not like getting told you look like George Clooney or Ryan Reynolds or something like that. Right? So someone made this reference in front of G, and I saw his eyes light up. He put that in his file, his needlepoint file for that evening. So he was giving me the gears about it later. And there's no other way to say it. I just kind of snapped a little. And I said, yeah, G, is that right? Well, you know who you resemble? Have you seen Downton Abbey? You're Mrs. Patmore. They really did not like that. But if you think about it, those are the only 3 times I ever saw him truly mad. Gee, I'm sorry about that. I can't see it now. I'm sorry about that Mrs. Patmore thing, but you know, not far off. Okay, I've talked a bit about what G wasn't. I mean, there's tons more, right? He wasn't impressed by your status. He wasn't interested in what you did for a living or what you drove or where you lived. He was only interested in what you were contributing at this moment, right? He was like an accidental guru because there's no one more in the now than him, which you found out very quickly if you spent too much time on your phone in front of him. He wasn't oblivious. He knew what was going on around him all the time. Could read people like no one I'd ever met. I always thought it was like he got subtitles on life. He's not narrow-minded. He traveled widely on his own with Julie and the kids. He'd eat anything. And you know, the weird thing I just thought of the other day, speaking of not being narrow-minded, is I had no idea what G's politics were. I knew him for 30 years. Spent countless hours on the road, many nights at the house, cooking, all over the place, and I could not tell you who he voted for, ever. And I thought, that's an incredible achievement in this hyper-partisan 1 and 0, you have a different opinion than me, so I hate you world that we increasingly live in. Okay, but enough about who he wasn't. Now we're going to talk about who and what he was, and that's what our special guests are going to do. But let me just start off with one quick reflection. But of course, if I'm boring you, I'm not offended at all if you want to go over to the bar. That's what G would have wanted. So who was G? What was G? What do I think? Well, he was a great dancer. Surprisingly, maybe. He really was a great dancer. He was a great golfer, great tennis player, pretty good at cooking. He's a great husband a lot of the time. He was an amazing dad. But one thing that I know for sure that he really was, he was sentimental. He was very attached to his memories of experiences and the totems that reminded him of them. He even had a way of getting sentimental over things that hadn't happened yet. I heard a story about one of G's many, many, many moves from house to house. It happened around 1995, and I think Chris Mantrop and Matt McPherson were there for this. Apparently they came across a file folder while they're helping him move, thick with clippings. And on the front of it was labeled, "The Day." What could it be? The movie script? Novel in process? No, they opened it up. It was dozens and dozens of photos and articles of suggestions and inspirations for his wedding day. Bear in mind, this was 5 years before he even met Julie. At that time, the idea of G having a wedding day, well, everyone's got a dream, but your dreams have to be realistic. Has any other man in the history of the world done something like that? Right? I asked Chris Mantrop about it last week. I said, do you think he used that file for his actual wedding day? And Mantrop said, yeah, but by then it wasn't a file, it was a banker's box. The most vivid example I personally witnessed about his sentimentality was on yet another one of his moves. There was this big blue container, you know, the plastic ones you get at Walmart, the lid's already cracked for you, you can get it home. So I went to lift it, and I mean lift it, I couldn't even shift it. The thing was so heavy. I said, gee, we're going to need to get the Welsh Rugby Sevens over to move this thing out. So what the hell's in there? And he said, don't open that. Oh, okay, so I opened it. And inside were 15 to 20 carefully wrapped in cloth, all different sizes and conditions, barbecue grills. He'd kept the grills not only from every barbecue he'd ever had, but every barbecue he'd ever been around. I didn't know how to react. I mean, I'd seen that show Hoarders, right? And I always thought, like, wasn't there anyone around who could have said something before things got out of hand? I like, one bedroom full of newspapers is enough, isn't it? So I thought, should I say something? And I looked across the room, and there was another identical blue container, and I said, what's in there? And he goes, oh, you're a fucking lawyer now. Asking questions you know the answer to. Yes, G was sentimental. He had many emotional attachments. And where does that come from? Well, it probably comes from your childhood. It comes from your upbringing. It comes from your immediate family that shaped you and molded you and sent you out to take on that world. So now let's hear a bit more about that side from some of the people that knew G best. I want to ask you to help me welcome to the stage Gareth's Aunt Sue, and a good friend of mine who's had a hell of a month. I want you to let him know how much love we have for him. G's younger brother, Kevin Carter, and his daughter, Alicia. Keep it going until he gets to the podium. Keep it going until he gets to the podium, or it'll be awkward.
You gotta keep clapping, Aunt Sue, hey? Come on, Aunt Sue! Really? Wow. It's great to see everyone here today, and it's great that one man had such a positive impact on your life. You take this time, come here today to celebrate our brother, Gareth Carter. If you are here, you must have thought of your love for G and his family at some time before and certainly after July 1st. You probably experienced a multitude of emotions: disbelief, sadness, anger, grief. You know, time to be weak, a need to be tough, grateful, a feeling of pride in G that you knew him, and a whole lot of happiness from great times and memories. Times and memories that will never be repeated. I can't celebrate today. I can only be sad and angry that G is not here today with all of us. He's not here today to ask me, what are we having? What are we going to eat? Because G wouldn't show up for his own celebration if he didn't know what was on the menu way ahead of time. If G and his family were coming to our place for the weekend or whatever, for any event or holiday, he would ask me, what are we having? What are we eating? We would review every meal for the day for the next 1, 2, 3 days. We would discuss it. He would influence it. He would get this, I would get that. We'd bring it all together. It all worked out ahead of time. A plan was in place, and G was happy. And he was already looking forward to it a week in advance. Same if we were going to his place or the cottage, he would come up to me and say, okay, what are we going to have? What are we eating? And we'd work it out. And again, G would be looking forward to it a week in advance. We were from the ages of 10 until 20. We would take hundreds of pictures of each other standing next behind our massive layered sandwiches, or barbecued pheasant or duck with a 35mm camera, and take pictures of each other's and our creations, way before taking pictures of your food was even happening. And G never stopped taking pictures of almost every plate and meal since then. No one can eat until everything decent was shot on the table. Just like when it came to food, when it came to friends, G always liked to think ahead and care and prepare for the best time possible. He had a plan, and it started with friends and family, and then food, drink, music, and so on. I want to see him today, enjoying your love, enjoying your friendship and your company. On the grill, near the cooler, in the kitchen, sitting near the fire, being around the table, listening with his arms crossed, to hear his giggle and then laugh, and then get that look that I should probably stop talking or at least keep it down a little. I can see him now. I can see him walking through the door. Hey, G, hey, G, hey, you know. I can see him now laughing and loving his great family and friends. You know, Julie, Reese, Sky, Pat, Philip, Maggie, Alicia, Lee, and Michelle. The McDonald family, the Dingle family, the entire Collingwood family. Thinking of his mom, his St. Andrews and Aurora High family, his entire Sunday football family, and I could go on and on. Family was very important to G, and he was fiercely loyal to those he cared and loved about. The last call I had was G. He was lamenting the impacts that our Ontario lockdowns had on him and everyone he knows. He had to start something new during this time and get busy again. He was antsy, but he's always antsy. These days, he was super antsy, as it's been 18 months. We talked about getting e-bikes, and since I bought one, because at 37 kilometers an hour, tears don't sit in your eyes. He said he wanted to start creating a horticultural gardens to replace people's lawns, to create lawns into gardens and produce something, versus just watering and fertilizing and cutting green grass every week to look good. Something that produces something. G was a producer. He was always thinking, and his mind was always super active. We talked for an hour and a half. It was the longest phone call we've had in years. Reese told me that G even mentioned it to him and with some fondness. That is epic. Even G picking up the phone was epic. Most of our calls were straight to the point, cover as many topics and points as humanly possible, the shortest amount of time, but this one was special. I've known G for almost 50 years. In that time, you can start to take any relationship for granted. You kid yourself. But that person will always be there for at least another 20 years. But what are we granted? You're only granted these minutes you have here today. Past that point, I can't guarantee or grant you or myself anything. We should never take things for granted, but most importantly, times with the ones we love. I'm saying this to myself, obviously. But if you are here today, you had a connection with G and his family. Friends and family are the foundation of everything else we do in life. So I just want to say thank you for coming. I'm also saying a deep thank you from Gareth and his entire family for being a part of his life. We don't get by it, we just get through it. And we get through it together. One love.
That's going to be hard to top. I'm going to try to keep this short and sweet, because if I know G, I know he'd be sitting there rolling his eyes at me for going off on some long rant. I think we're all a little surprised to be here today. I think 51 is way too young. But I heard a song the other day that was called The Mighty Die Young. And boy was G ever mighty. Underneath that tough and mighty exterior was a man who maybe not everyone saw all the time. But I always felt like if I sat and talked to my Uncle G long enough, that soft side would really come through. When I looked at him, I saw a man who deeply cared for his family and friends, who could always make you smile, could always fill your heart with love and your stomach with food. On top of all that, I saw someone who was a great father to my wonderful cousins, Reese and Sky, a loving husband to my Aunt Julie, the best brother my dad could have ever asked for, and my all-time favorite uncle. But I think every one of us saw a man who was larger than life, which is why it's going to be so hard to continue on with our lives without him in them. But if G were here, and I know he is, he would tell us to continue to laugh, smile, eat, drink, have fun. But most importantly, he would tell us to continue to love. Because I know how much G loved me and the rest of our family, but I also know how much he loved his friends, his work, his dog, his life. And while it's important to remember him and feel the impact that he left, important to blast music at 6 a.m., important to take pictures of your sandwiches, important to sneak a little vodka in your kombucha, important to tell stories about 20 steeplechase. It's also important to carry his love with us everywhere we go. So thanks, Uncle G, for all that storytelling, great food, laughter, and love. I'll miss the stories, food, and laughs, but I know the love will carry on forever.
Get on my shoulders, get on my shoulders.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Gareth and Sue, his mom's sister, and the last standing Dingle in the crowd. When we were all together 3.5 years ago to celebrate Barb's life, if you had told me we would be doing the same thing for Gareth, I would have told you you were crazy. But here we are. It is difficult to put anything to paper, as I still find this so unbelievable. But I do want to share a bit with you, which I have done as a letter to G. Dear Gareth, well, bud, things should not be this way. We oldie moldies are supposed to go first. And what is it with our family? Eve lost her mom when she was 16. Jennifer and Jana lost their mom when they were 14 and 16. Leslie and Jason weren't very old when they lost their dad, Christopher. And I had just turned 16 when my dad passed. So, recent sky, when we say we understand what you are going through, we really do. And we will be here for you always. Gee, many people always ask how the Dingle-Carter connection happened. I don't know if you know the whole story, but it began way back in the 50s. My dad sold china and crystal, and one of the salesmen that Dad dealt with from the potteries in England was Doug Carter, Philip's dad. Our parents always hosted these folks in our home. The Carters decided to immigrate to Canada and arrived in 1956, 58, Philip, my mind is in there. I can't remember which. Doug, Jess, Christopher, and Pip. Yep, that's what we called your dad back then. I'd venture a guess that I've known Philip longer than anyone else here today. Our two families became very close, and as a matter of fact, called them Uncle Doug and Auntie Jess. Boy, did that confuse people when your mom and dad got married. Uncle Doug, Auntie Jess, in-laws, what's this? But married they did, and in January of 1970, they welcomed you with open arms, blonde curly hair and all. You were a good baby and grew into an active teen. You were very proud of your Welsh name. My name is not Garth, it's Gareth. G-A-R-E-T-H. You were so cute the way you said it. Back then, hockey was very big in your life. Do you remember the Christmas I gave you rookie cards, you and Kevin rookie cards, from some young up-and-coming hockey star? I didn't know who he was, but I really hope he kept them. They might be worth something today. The hockey star, by the way, was Wayne Gretzky. Your moms and my other sister Judy had 2 girls, and the 4 cousins loved each other so much. Remember at Christmas, you 4 had a kids' table in the kitchen. Long after you had been invited to join the adults, you declined, saying, "We have too much fun in here." We were never really sure what you did, but there was always lots of laughter. And tell me, just how do you get grape juice on the ceiling? And then there was the phone bill in January that had a bunch of 1-900 calls on it. You said it was Jennifer. You were part of Ben's and my wedding along with Kevin and Jennifer. The three of you looked great in tails. I hate to say it, but in August that'll be 35 years ago. Before we knew it, you were 21 and your parents gave you a big party. Gee, you were terrified that some of your friends, and I know some of them are here today, would drink too much and make fools of themselves. Anyway, you didn't have to worry. It was your good old Aunt Sue that was found asleep on the stairs. Saved you. You're welcome. That's one of Gareth's favorite stories. I have to say, an aside here, it was one of G's favorite stories. Then there was the antics at a Ducks Unlimited dinner, and it might have been the year of Creemore, who was a dog, by the way, other than a beer. It was near the end of the night, and we had helped clear the room. You suddenly came up to Ben, hoisted him on your shoulder, ran the legs of Donardo's ballroom. You set him back down, and with a twinkle in your eye, you said, "I've always wanted to do that." Barb was horrified, but Ben and I still laugh about it today. We're going to miss you doing crazy things. Oh, and then there was the time you lived in Sally's cottage. I was just finishing up the season opening clean when you moved in. And just a reminder, a summer cottage that's locked up all winter can sometimes leave critters behind, dead or alive. I always opened each door in every dresser just in case. I'm in the final bedroom, last dresser, second drawer, I opened it, things are moving, I slammed it shut, oops, I caught a tail. I hear a woman scream, and I knew it wasn't me. I turned around, and you were out in the living room. "I don't like mice," you say. And me, I'm killing myself laughing at your scream. "Gee, you have to help me carry this dresser outside." Nope. He didn't want to get close to those mice. I somehow convinced you to help me, and we lugged the heavy oak dresser out to the front lawn. You retreated to the safety of the front porch, while I opened the drawer and released the family of mice. Your comment? "Aunt Sue, those babies are going to freeze and die." You were worried about the mice, but you sure didn't want them in the cottage. And the best was during your cemetery days. We were sitting on our back having a beer after the end of the day. You were sharing with us what your activity of the day had been. You and a fellow worker had been assigned the task of breaking the eggs in the goose nests on the property, I guess to keep the goose population down. And this is a bit of a G visual here. It was something like this. You were in the bucket in a front end loader, moving in on a nest. And here comes Mama. Swamp, swamp, swamp. "Hurry up, get me closer," he says. And she kept coming. Swamp, swamp. Ben and I had tears running down our faces. We were laughing so hard. Gee, you are so funny. I will always see you standing on the back stairs telling that story. So with breaking hearts, we have to let you go. We will miss your humor, your laugh, your food, your hospitality, your ability to tell a story, your love, and your never-ending supply of Men in Knives t-shirts. We will miss you, being you. We promise we will have Julie Reese and Skies back. I love you to the moon and back. We will meet again someday. Until then, rest in peace, dear Chief. Love always, Aunt Julie.
Let's hear it another time for the Carter family. You have any idea how hard it is to do that? Any idiot can get up here and make a few jokes. To actually speak from the heart like that, very moving. Well, that was an interesting look at G. Now we're going to take a different perspective from kind of the same time frame. G as a child and a younger guy. So I'm a small town guy myself. I'm from Orangeville, Ontario. And really, your stroke of Zen or something, a friend of mine that I grew up with, is actually here too, Jennifer Georges, who willingly married into the McDonald family too. She's married to Devin McDonald, Julie's cousin. So let's take a little trip back to G as a friend, starting with as a child. I want to welcome Matt McPherson. Remember, we have to keep the applause going so it's not awkward. Oh, he's right there.
Yeah, my plan was to skip my birthday this year, actually, in honor of this day. Gareth Carter, Karts Master, Big G, just G, and occasionally Carter Farter Starter. Being friends with G is one of my greatest accomplishments. Everybody loved that guy. And boy, did he like to talk and tell stories. So today I'm going to tell a few stories. I'm going to try to paint a picture of who G was back in the old Aurora days, as a young lad in his teens and through our 20s. And I want to get across some of the core qualities that are kind of part of Big G's DNA, or what I want to call his GNA. And I share these with the echoing voices of a lot of the old gang: Ian Patey, Mike Alexander, Harry Gundy, David Foster, and everyone from the old gang. You guys know who you are. If you were there, you remember. From an early age, friends, family, fun, and food were core to his GNA. So I first met G in Cubs, and I instantly wanted to be his friend because he was huge, and I thought he could beat up all the kids I didn't like. But I was wrong. Gareth was a gentle giant. Over the years, I came to realize that although he could scare people with he had that look, and he didn't mind punishing people on the ice or on the field in sport, he hated fighting. One time we were at a house party. It was actually in a horse barn up in East or West Gwillimbury, I'm not sure which. And a horse barn was one of the places where you would go for a party when the parents were home, the others being a park or a field. And so we were in the occasional horse barn up in East or West Gwillimbury, I can't remember, one of the Gwillimburys. We didn't know very many people. And then the U2 or Smith song that was playing at the time kind of skipped. And some of the strange kids, some of the strange Gwillimburians were eyeballing us. And G was the biggest, so we all kind of stood behind him. And then the lights went out. And when the lights came back up, there was this little East Gwillimburian or West Gwillimburian trying to punch G in the knees. And did G pound the kid? Nope. He just walked away. He just left the party because, actually, I think we ran to the car and sped away. But he never came to fight. He just wanted to come out to the party, wanted to tell stories, he wanted to be with his friends, and he wanted to have a good time. So I got to tell you a little bit about the jobs. G and I became really close friends. It was the summer after grade 10. And my sister Shauna worked at the Youth Employment Office up in York Region and hooked G and I up with a series of odd, and I do mean odd, jobs. Throwing hay at a farm, digging a trench in some yard, dressing up as Sylvester and Tweety Bird to entertain kids at an attempt to set the world record for the largest ever aerobics event at Fairy Lake in Newmarket. And we, in costume, made the front page of the Era banner for that one. And then I got to tell you about the strawberries. There was the strawberries. G and I picked them professionally for one day. One long, painful, back-breaking day. And they dock you for the ones that you eat, and they dock you for the ones that you destroy. So we picked a few, and we ate a few, and I crushed a few, and G crushed a lot. I don't know if you ever looked at G's fingers closely, but they were not the delicate digits of a professional strawberry picker. So at the end of the day, all the pros who do it every day and have figured out the piecework go up and they collect their 80 or 100 bucks. And then I go up, and the guy gives me a crisp $10 bill for a day's work. G goes up, and the guy says, if G gives him $5, he can come back the next day and try again. G did not eat a strawberry for the next 25 years, no lie. Like anyone who remembers that period, he hated strawberries. And he always claimed that society's most hardened criminals should be sentenced to 20 years hard labor strawberry picking. Oh, who was G? He liked having fun, he loved playing games, and he was more than just a little bit competitive. The games we played through high school and into our 20s were endless. Indoor par 3 mini kickball golf, full tackle basketball, and I think a couple of people here might remember the gas pedal incident from full tackle basketball, where one of the kids grabbed G by his feet and drove his heel into G's nuts as part of the game. And G pounded him with one shot, one time when he wasn't so gentle, and nobody faulted him for it. Endless foosball tournaments. Oh, the foosball that we played on the old foosball table from the basement at Steeplechase. Horseshoes at the Severn. G was almost unbeatable at horseshoes. I don't know if anyone remembers in those later years. He was literally a ringer. People wouldn't even play him anymore. He got so good. And darts. He loved to play darts, and he was great at darts. And he even took Truly to a darts championship when they were living over in the UK, which G assured everybody was 1,000 times more exciting than it sounds. And when we didn't have when we didn't have a game to play, we just made one up. We couldn't just ride the ATVs, we had to do time trials. So from the Paities to the DeHaas house in Wycliffe and back to Paities. Go! And that route, for those from Aurora might remember, included a stretch of Yonge Street. And one evening, a local police officer was more than happy to officiate our race. Unfortunately, Ian Patey could talk himself out of any situation, and we all escaped unscathed that night. And Kevin brought it up. I got to mention a little bit here about Sunday football. One Sunday in about grade 9 or 10, we decided to play full tackle football at Devons Drive Public School. It was a few of Gareth and Kevin's buddies, and Paul Patterson's brother's friends. They were older, tougher, meaner, stronger, and their team became famously known as the Criminals. And I think our team was called something like Gareth and his cute little friends. It was a legendary game, at least in our minds. We thought we held our own. But it became a tradition. Sunday football. We later moved the venue to Aurora High, and we played every single week. It brought a group of friends together. It was about friends and fun, and it was competitive, and G loved it. And he was not gentle on the field. He channeled his favorite player, New York Giants linebacker Lawrence Taylor, the mean LT, 56. G loved that guy. And just a couple weeks ago, I was talking with Mike Alexander. I said, why did you never play Sunday football? And he admitted, I was scared shitless to play with Big G. People blew knees, there was a broken collarbone, Gareth broke his leg, there were concussions, but we still loved it. Every damn week, it was our tradition. It was so awesome. What a crew. Some of the regulars, Kevin, of course, Stevens, who's here today, Ralphie Boy, Big Ball Batterson, and the Botchford brothers. Jason Botchford, he also left us too soon, and suddenly. And I'm thinking that Botch and G, you guys are over on the other side, so you're the captains. You get to pick the teams. And whoever's first might want to pick Big Chris McElroy, who also left us too soon, another fellow food industry guy. And he played Sunday football with us once. He was 6'11" and 280 pounds at the age of 15, and he injured half our regulars, so we didn't invite him back. And then there's the food, another component of the GNA. There were signs from a really early age about G's future in food, actually. In our 20s, at the Alexander home, or basically whoever's parents weren't home, we would always bring the feasts. It was simple at the time. It was meat on the barbecue, usually ribs, and maybe some sides, I don't know. But it was always about the meat, always about the ribs. And then the first real spark of G's future in food started at 860 Bloor, where G and I lived with Janice Kinney. And Jan and I were fresh out of school, and G was our rich friend, because he'd been working for 4 or 5 years. He drove an Acura Integra, flashy sports car. He was flush, always had a wallet full of cash. But although he was making great coin, his soul was dying inside. He'd managed to find the only job that was worse than picking strawberries. He was digging graves at Highland Memorial Gardens. And it was getting to him. He was depressed. And so, G liked to watch a little bit of TV here and there. And back in those days, to decompress and, sort of forget what awful days he was having, he'd come back and he'd watch TV. But he didn't just watch crap. He watched cooking shows all the time. Back to back to back cooking shows to take his mind off those crappy days. Anthony Bourdain was one of his heroes. Passion for food and travel. And he continued to teach himself how to cook. And eventually, he came up with a legendary idea. It would be a dinner party that was also an event. Part competition, part extravaganza, printed menus, multiple set courses, and he called it the Gourmet Showdown. It had everything in Gareth's GNA, everything he liked. It had food, it had friends, it had an element of competition, and it also involved family, because our first Gourmet Showdown guests were actually our parents. You could say that this was the seed of what would one day blossom into a thriving business in food. But that seed needed to be planted and watered and nurtured, and it needed Julie McDonald. And that's the last component of the GNA, family. I didn't have any natural brothers, but G was like a brother to me. He lived in our basement for a year, and my mom loved him like a son. And then Kevin has always been like our other little brother, who you had to keep an eye on, because you never knew what Kevin was going to do. Kevin, I love you, but you're nuts. And then there's the family that you choose. Julie McDonald. I love when G and Julie came together so much, because G was joining with a family that I had loved most of my entire life. I counted Steve and Duff, and then Julie among my closest friends. And then, of course, there's the family that he built, Reese and Sky. I love you guys. I'll say it again. G's brothers and sisters, all of us, this whole community, we're always here for you and your mom. I love that your dad is still here in all of us. He's still here. So I just want to leave it on a little bit of a lighter note here. A couple of my favorite texts from G, and I'm sure you've all received some good G texts. Okay, this first one. Any chance you can get your hands on some smoked pork jowl? This one from the cottage one summer. Get up here, Maddie. I got some chicken hearts and an octopus, and we got to figure out what to do with them. Happy birthday, you old cock knocker, every year. And of course, when's beer? Well, G, I will be raising many glasses to you in places near and far. You left us way too soon. But the impact that you made, the fun, the friendships, the food, and the impact on your family will be everlasting. I love you, G.
Well, you know, it wasn't just the impact on his family, it was the impact on another family, too. Are you familiar with that movie, Meet the Parents? Well, as it turns out, the original script for that movie was actually called Meet the McDonalds. And it was not so much of a comedy, it was more of an action-packed thriller. So I always wondered what it was like for G to enter into that family and how that family looked at G and how that evolved over the years. And now we're going to take a look at that side of G's life. A very special presentation from the person who won the longest drive award, who came the furthest to be here, Julie's oldest brother, Scott McDonald.
Good evening, and hi everyone. I'm very, very happy to be here tonight with so many friends and family to celebrate G, and particularly to try and focus in on this picture of what G meant to the McDonalds. But to do that, I have to step back and just give you a bit of warning on the McDonalds, because our family is a difficult one. Very emotional, very volatile, and at times downright ornery. In fact, we had to keep one brother out of the celebration today to make sure there wouldn't be violence. I understand why G was attracted to Julie. That's obvious. But this family isn't an easy gang, so you can imagine our amazement when it was announced that Julie and G were a couple. You already know the end of the story. Over the years, G charmed us all, and we all fell in love with him. And so this month, we lost a brother-in-law, a son-in-law, a friend, a brother, a son, a peacekeeper, and someone who'd become really finely interwoven into the McDonald family life. But that is the end of the tale. So I'm going to tell you a bunch of anecdotes about G's time with us, which hopefully will add a bit of color and a bit of the humor that G would have demanded. Yet it's only really a fragment of his wonderful relationship with the McDonalds, but I hope it gives you some glimpse of the importance of him to us. Going fourth or fifth in the line of speeches means all of the very funny people that came before you stole all your stories. So I'm going to have to ad-lib a little bit as we go along too. But both Steve and Duff knew Gareth in high school, as you've heard from many people now. And I asked them to summarize in one sentence what that experience was like. And Steve said Gareth was larger than life already in grade 8. And he had spectacular hair. If you would like to know what type of hair he had, there is a version right here in the front. Please, do you want to stand up and just look out to the crowd? And Duff said the only thing he can remember is that he and G were chasing after the same girl in high school, and he was always looking over his shoulder to see whether G was after him. It's only a moderately good story until I heard that that girl is actually out there in the crowd somewhere. You know who you are. And another story that few people have already touched on tonight, perhaps with some inkling of what G wanted to get up to with Julie. It was actually my brother Steve and Rob Saley over here who broke G's leg playing Sunday football, and then he went on to Australia. So that was just an early family warning. The first time G met my dad was at a stag party at the cottage. It was at Steve's stag party, and G already had his eye on Julie, and he was so intent at impressing my dad that he stayed completely sober all weekend and did all the chores my dad wanted done around the cottage. And little did he know that not drinking beer was not the way to my dad's heart. In the early years of G's relationship with my family, my dad used to call him Yorick, who was the skull they exhumed in Hamlet in honor of his work at the graveyard. My parents had a farm near Duntroon for many years, and they made cider every year. And the year G figured out how to motorize the cider press was the year he earned my father's love. In the years after that, G did an unfathomable amount of work around the cottage, but his specialty was dump runs with the mini trucks that he had. I've never been able to fathom quite why he liked that so much. Once, G's brother Kevin, who you saw up here earlier, almost blew it for him with my dad. He came to the cottage and he went fishing and lost one of my dad's favorite fishing rods over the side of the boat. It's hard to say whether alcohol was involved or not. But remarkably, Julie and G actually found that same rod years later scuba diving and saving the paternal support that they might have lost. And on a more serious note, after my dad died, G made an enormous contribution to supporting and taking care of my mom, helping Julie at every turn. And who else here has gone on holiday to such hot son-in-law, mother-in-law vacation spots like Bali, Costa Rica, Jamaica, and about 30 other countries? Julie, G, Sky, and Reese, we're a family, as you know, that live life to the fullest. Every day, traveled the world together. They also work together. One beef we've always had with the name Men with Knives is we thought it should have been Family with Knives, or as someone said to me today, Men with Knives and Women with Whips. Julie and G, as you know, lived in Wales when I was living in London at the time. And on one visit to London, G asked me if I wanted to make a paella with him. And he arrived at 9 in the morning with a whole crate of the shells of prawns. And we proceeded for about 8 hours to boil them down and get the ooze that comes out of prawns. And it was the most fantastic paella I've ever tasted. But it was so good and so strong, it sent my wife into premature labor. And I had my only daughter the next morning, 3 weeks early. Reese was born when they were in Wales, and I was one of the early visitors to Reese when he joined the never-ending Julie and G traveling and living campaign as a very small fellow. And when I first saw him, he was almost translucent because he'd been traveling so much. He's gained some color since then and grown into a pretty fine fellow. And I think Sky, when she was born, she got some genetically coded message in the womb, and she understood that nothing was going to curb her parents' zest for life. And she came out as the quietest and most unperturbed baby we've ever known. My father-in-law used to call her the magic baby. And we always thought she took after her dad. She was much better than any of us at listening rather than speaking too much. And she's also grown into a very fine young woman. We had a party once at a castle in Scotland with the whole MacDonald gang, and G was there. It was a very real, very old and delicate castle, and after a tremendous week, G threw a snowball through one of the ornate windows in the castle. Once during one of our family trips to Collingwood, we wanted to go and see Reese play hockey. And so all the McDonald's went, and we set up quite a ferocious cheering station at the hockey game. And I have never seen someone play hockey so hard and come close to scoring so many times as Reese did that day. I'd also never seen G so proud to watch his son play hockey. The last thing Duff and G were texting about, only 3.5 weeks ago, was a real plan to start making kombucha hot sauce. And I think the world will be far worse off without that. But I think, Reese, that's a job for you. You got to pick that up. And more seriously, again, G has always reminded us of Switzerland in the MacDonald family. He's the neutral family member. The space near the barbecue or the stove was always neutral territory for people, particularly other in-laws. Of course, I need to also say a few words about cooking. G's visits to us always meant cooking, great restaurants, food, discussion, and every visit required serious recovery for the host. Although G and Julie never seemed to require recovery, they had the stamina of Spartan soldiers, which is quite remarkable. I read recently, I picked up a book about American Thanksgiving, and it was all about, it was supposed to be this extraordinary book about interesting things about Thanksgiving, and the main point seemed to be that you could cook turkey in multiple ways. And I thought, oh my God, G is so far ahead of this guy. He's been doing this for decades. We had a Thanksgiving, a McDonald Thanksgiving here maybe 15 years ago, and he cooked us 3 turkeys, the traditional way, deep-fried turkey, and a beer can turkey. They all tasted identical. And a final mystery for you, and those of you who know G may be able to help me later on and answer this question. Because over the years, G made hundreds, if not thousands of meals for our family. They were all magnificent, and they got better over time as he mastered his craft. However, he almost never ate the meal with us. He was always working on some future cooking project. So we want to know when and what he actually did eat. So you can come and tell me afterwards. But G's greatest contribution to the family was his partnership with Julie, and his love, kindness, adventure, and support that helped her grow, blossom into the amazing woman she is today. With G, Julie was deeply happy on one long, wondrous adventure, created a family, built a business, built the hundreds of friendships that are represented on this lawn, and this is the life-affirming legacy that G leaves behind. So in the end, with his big personality, love of life, and big heart, he is a part of the McDonald family. He shaped it, and he made it better. He was a fantastic partner and soulmate for Julie, the best father to 2 spectacular kids, but he was also a friend, brother, and son to all of us. The Carter family will be part of the McDonald family forever, and we'll miss G every day. And who knows how and what we will eat.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. I think we're really starting to get a handle on, who G was by hearing from different people and the different relationships, different perspectives. And, Scott started to hint at it, but, we've gone deep into a lot of his relationships with other people. But the one that we haven't talked a ton about is the one relationship that defined so much of his adult life, which was his relationship with his taste buds. I read this article that was about G. It was in On the Bay magazine from around 2015. And I was profoundly moved by this one passage. They said, Carter likes to experiment and have fun with his smoker. He has tried almost every type of protein you can think of. He has smoked giant coiled sausages in the forest and scallops for something special. Staples like chicken wings and, out of curiosity, hard-boiled eggs. After many tests and trials, his favorite thing to smoke is, this is a real left turn here. His favorite thing to smoke is a shoulder of lamb. Smoked lamb, now that's something that really, really works, he said. And I love how the article put in both reallys. Very few people are able to turn their passion into a profitable business. G, let it be said, with Julie's strong guidance, did just that. So now we're going to hear from someone who's been there for G's entire journey as a professional chef, going all the way back to the Boston Pizza days. In fact, I think the Smartenkas are here today. Please welcome Ashley Kennedy. And the crew, I'm sorry, I didn't know they were coming, but I'm glad they are.
I have to pull an Aunt Sue here. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Ashley Kennedy. I have had the pleasure of knowing G since around 2005 when I was thankfully hired by the Bourdain family to help open the Boston Pizza franchise in Collingwood, where Gareth was the kitchen manager. So one of my first actual memories of G is his face in the expo window as we're pretending we don't see him filling up our pots to take to the tables, and he's yelling, "Runners! Runners! Even walkers! Even walkers is fine." And we're still filling and filling, and you know, like we can't hear them calling. Nope, nobody then? Cool. So anyways, that was one of my first memories of G. It was definitely always a pleasure to work with him there, and Sky and Reese were quite tiny. Sky was actually still in a bucket seat, and we used to sneak Reese behind the line and feed him gummy worms, because that's where we kept them to make dessert. But one of the things that has been said so much tonight is about love and family, which is why we're all up here, because past and present, you don't get out of G's life once you're in it. And we're not just a company, we're a family, and it is just, it's been a pleasure to be a part of it. But anyways, I'll just kind of skip back, because over the last few years working with G as I came back from out west and became a part of Men with Knives again, we realized that there are a few rules that you have to be able to follow to work for MWK. So one of the main ones is that all recipes are not legible. They will be sent to you in a sideways photo written in Sharpie at 2 a.m. and you will have to sort them out on your phone. And when you write down tomato instead of tomato, he will catch it and question why. Another rule is no nesting. In case you're wondering what nesting is, it's basically like just finding spots for things to fit. No nesting. You have to play the shape game when you're putting stuff away. Don't make new piles, unless of course you have a G on your chef coat. Then you can make as many nests and piles as you'd like. You also have to be able to listen and work at the same time, because the amount of childhood stories, including many about the tennis court at the old house, you have to be able to chop and listen, or your day is going to be very unproductive. Rule number 4 would be to expect the unexpected. So on July 3rd, when we were working at cleaning out the larder, which is where G spent so much of his time doing all of our smoking, the ribs, the pulled pork, the brisket, all of a sudden there's a delivery. And it is 2 bags, waist high, of garlic scapes that G had ordered for the chefs to make garlic scape pesto and not told a soul. So expect the unexpected, and go on the fly is definitely another one. Another thing is the open door policy and being a family. Like I said, we are a family, not a company, and G is one of the proudest parents I know, not only of Reese and Sky. We know probably way too many stories about you guys, but he was the proudest parent of all of our families, and I think I can speak on that for everybody. I remember a couple of weeks into June actually, and we were up at Alpine working on one of our last Epicurean dinner series, and Jules and I were doing some paperwork. G comes out of the kitchen. Jules! You see this video on Facebook that Ashley put up of her son riding a 4-wheeler? He's only 3. How cool is he? And I thought, that is who he is. He's not just proud of Reese and Sky. He's not just proud to be a mentor. He's not just proud to be a husband. He is so proud of everybody that he has been a part of. He's so proud of all of his employees. He is just so full of love that it is hard to fathom being able to expel that much and keep it going because he had the biggest heart we've ever seen. And speaking of love, it had to be on every menu. It was, in fact, made it onto some of our recipe cards if I didn't catch it in time to delete it as the last ingredient before it's sent to print. And then he would get mad. Jules, why did you take love off my ingredient? I had it on there. Well, she'd say, I didn't take it off, ask Ashley. And I would say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know you put it there. My bad. And she would say, you know, saying my bad doesn't fix anything, right? And I'm like, well, so sorry, my bad. Anyway, so those are a few rules that you obviously have to be able to live by, because once you become an MWK team member, you're here for life. And we put an ankle tracker on you, and that's about it, yeah. Anyways, I'm not going to keep everybody much longer because we really want you to enjoy and celebrate and have a cheers. But I will just finish up by saying that the night that G went to St. Mike's, which was ironically the night before our final Epicurean dinner series, we, the MWK team, had a little drink and cheers, and we said, you know, no matter what happens tonight, that we're going to knock tomorrow out of the park because G would kick our asses if tomorrow night's dinner isn't full of love. We won't be changing that commitment, and we'll continue to knock MWK out of the park and fill his legacy full of love every day to come. Thank you. Cheers to G.
Oh, that was amazing, and I very well know about G and his rules. The problem is, he would never tell you what the rules were until you violated them. Then you found out that why was he pissed off. But I just want to tell you one thing, like, I'm in the event business. That's what I do for a living. I work on the highest end events you can imagine. I've never seen a crew that can touch the Men with Knives crew. For the work they do, the service they give, it's only a matter of time before they take over the world. Okay. We've got one more speaker group. We've learned a lot about what G is, but I think we all know he's more than anything. He's a husband, and he was a dad. He was a proud and loving dad. He was an occasionally cantankerous dad. He was sometimes a tough dad, but whatever he and Julie did, they created two of the greatest, coolest, most easygoing, most independent children I've ever had the pleasure to know. Even though their dad wouldn't let them eat hot dogs. Why? In G's words, because there's no thought behind having hot dogs. And G thought about his meals, his and yours. You know that. So anyways, with that in mind, I want you to close your eyes for a moment. And I really want you to do it. I want you to conjure up a mental image of G in any circumstance. Doesn't matter, party, work, at home, whatever. Think about G. Just think of a picture of G. Hey, you got that picture? Hold it there. Now, imagine him taller. Imagine him slimmer. Better looking. Just as smart, but in a different way, like with books and stuff. Even more chill. Doesn't complain during road trips. Doesn't antagonize staff in restaurants. Well, guess what? You don't have to imagine. So open your eyes. Because that person is right here. He's Reese Carter. And he's going to be joined by his grandfather and G's dad, Phil Carter. Reese and Phil, come on up, please. Reese Carter, Phil Carter, everybody. Let's hear it.
Well, needless to say, this is a pretty tough act to follow here with all these great speeches. And as you can imagine, as Gareth's dad, a lot of these stories I heard before, but the version that I got was different. But what a great testament to Gareth. Anyway, just in case you're thinking that times are tough on Vancouver Island, maybe I should explain my attire. No doubt you all recognize this grubby men with knives shirt. And Gareth loved to wear it anywhere at any time. And he insisted, although heavily stained, as you can see. I think Julie said this is his smoker shirt. He tried to convince me that it was always clean. I think when he first started to wear this, I did ask him if it was not a better option. But after that, I knew better than to keep my mouth shut and make no further comments. But he knew how much it bugged me. It's funny how kids love to do those things, even if they're 51. And the hat, well... I think I'd probably give him a smile if he could see me in this today. Anyway. When Gareth was born on January the 15th, 1970, Barb and I had already agreed on the name Gareth. Having been born in Wales myself, I always thought Gareth to be a good, strong Welsh name. In actual fact, it is of Welsh origin and means gentle. And Gareth was actually the name of a modest and brave knight in King Arthur's court. It is ironic that Rhys ended up being born in Wales, about only 80 miles from where I was born, but that's another story. Barb and I were also concerned about how Gareth's name might be abbreviated, as I personally have always disliked abbreviations, such as Phil. I remember suggesting to Gareth as he got older to insist that his friends call him by his proper name, as my parents had done with me. And I think for the most part, in the early days, they did. In later years, that did eventually morph into G, and then with the advent of the Spoody world, it became Big G. And we all know how that can happen. Funnily enough, soon after Julie and Gareth got married, Julie asked me how I came up with the name Gareth. I told her that I came across it in a novel by Richard Llewellyn titled How Green Was My Valley, a story based in 1939 about life in a Welsh coal mining village similar to where I was born. Sometime later, Julie told me she'd read the book twice, and nowhere could she find the name Gareth. But the die was cast regardless. One thing that most of you might not know about Gareth is he was a trailblazer in more ways than one. Today, we live in an age where people are coming out of the closet in droves for one reason or another, and they're applauded for it. Gareth literally came out of the closet at a very young age. In fact, he was only 1 year old, and he never got applauded for it. You see, when Barb and I got married, we rented a small one-bedroom apartment on Balliol Street, or Balloyle as most people called it. When Gareth came along, the only place we could stick him was in the closet, in our bedroom. So I took the doors off, put in a few shelves, and that's where he slept for his first year until Kevin came along and we had to move to a bigger apartment. Gareth never really showed much interest in food. Never showed much interest in food growing up, other than consuming it. But he did start to show an interest in the Food Network and food shows that involved travel. It wasn't until near the end of his time working in the cemetery that an interest in smoking meats took hold, and he ended up buying a smoker. I could never get over his insistence that there was only one way to cook full pork. And if I remember correctly, it was for a minimum of 18 hours, which required him getting up in the middle of the night to restoke the smoker. Forever the purist. As most of you know, shortly after Julie and Gareth got married in July 2003, they had an opportunity to go to Wales to run the first five-star youth hostel in Europe, which happened to be in Panicum, West Wales. And I think that's when Gareth's interest in food and cooking really took on a new meaning. Maggie and I went over to visit them in the spring of '04, and spring in Wales is a special time. It's a time for fresh Welsh spring lamb, new potatoes, and fresh peas out of the garden. Gareth and I went to the butcher in St. David's, which wasn't far away, and they had lots of hoggets, but still a little too early for the new season lamb. A few days later we returned, and I bought the most expensive leg of lamb known to man, and I can still see the board on the butcher's wall giving the full lineage of this priceless lamb, right down, I think, to the color of the grass that it had been eating. The point of this story is that Julie and Gareth had very small accommodations, but I can see Gareth now sitting on the floor, looking through the glass oven door the whole time the lamb was roasting, to make sure we didn't overcook it. After a few days in Panicum, the four of us took off for Jauntville Island in their old beater. We took the ferry from West Wales to Southern Ireland, and although I paid the freight for a couple of nights, when we got to Killarney, Julie said that there was a nice hostel there, and as they got a free pass, they would stay there for the night. We agreed before going out for dinner that we would meet at the hostel for a drink and an appy that Gareth would organize. The friends of Julie's family that owned the hostel that Gareth and Julie were running in Wales had gifted them a very large tin of foie gras from France. Gareth had the foresight to bring this along on the trip to Ireland. When Maggie and I arrived at the hostel with a bottle of wine, we were met with the most amazing aroma. As you can imagine, the hostel was fairly stark, with long wooden tables and benches in the cafeteria area. There were a few other less fortunate people sitting around, dining on what appeared to be a bowl of cornflakes with a side order of spam. But over on the commercial stove, there was Gareth, pan-searing the foie gras, and this amazing aroma was permeating through the whole hostel. With a somewhat slight feeling of guilt, we made short order of both, the foie gras and the wine, much to the dismay of the other folk. The next year, when Reese was born, we met Julie and Gareth in London with their new pride and joy. And as one might have guessed, one of our first stops was Howard Food Halls. Maggie has a picture of Reese, sound asleep in his little carry basket, plunked on top of the counter of the oyster bar, with a tray of oysters, a bottle of champagne beside him, and yes, a credit card. Needless to say, there's a common theme here. Not only food, but good food with no limits. Gareth never turned down an opportunity to taste something new. Maggie and I feel very fortunate that Julie and Gareth didn't mind sharing their time with us old parts on a few memorable trips. In 2009, we did a bareboat barge charter on the Nivernais in Burgundy, France, along with our good friends Jane and Bruce Wilson, who are here today. When we arrived to start our trip, we obviously had to provision the barge, and there happened to be a very nice grocery market in town. After about 5 minutes of us all wandering the aisles and checking out all these goodies that would be foreign to a lot of Canadians, Maggie and Gareth happened to collide in one of the aisles. And Gareth's comments to Maggie were, "This is already the best holiday I've ever been on," as he grasped his basket of foie gras, quail eggs, duck confit, cassoulet, etc. Gareth was in his glory. In 2012, we did a card-to-family cruise in the Caribbean along with Kevin, Michelle, and Alicia. And then in 2018, another card trip to Bourdain, where we rented a chateau, which had been retrofitted with all the latest kitchen appliances. So once again, Gareth was in his element, or as you might say, his office. When COVID hit, of course, along with everyone else, we were cut off from our families. So Maggie and I were truly thankful that Gareth, Julie, Reese, and Skye came to visit us last year as part of their RV tour across Canada, and we particularly enjoyed the delightful days we had over in Tofino with them. When a tragedy like this occurs, these are the times and memories you truly cherish. And again, we're so grateful that Julie and Gareth included us in some of these adventures. Gareth was not the most prolific communicator, as we've heard many times tonight. And in fact, if I wanted to reply to an email, it had to have a food component of some kind. I don't do Facebook, but the other day I spent a few hours going through Gareth's Facebook pages, and it was obvious from his posts and comments. They all centered around the 4 F's, which again has been alluded to by many people tonight: family, friends, food, and fun. Gareth loved his family dearly and had a knack of attracting the very best of friends. So I think you will agree with me. That is not a bad way to describe Gareth's life journey. To finish off, after Gareth's passing, I noticed a sign in the house that said, "Eat well, travel often." The more I thought about that, it struck me that if Gareth had a wish for us all, or a recommendation for life, it might be just that. Eat well, travel often, and thank you all for coming. I said earlier this is a difference in generations. Reese has got his speech on this iPad, and mine's sort of etched in a piece of rock.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that I don't think I've ever been or will ever be to another memorial like this. It only makes sense given the man my dad was. Hello everyone, it's nice to see some familiar faces and some new ones here today. I am Reese Carter, or some of you may know me as G's son. My dad was an interesting man, and what I realized thinking back on my 16 years with him is that he wasn't just an amazing dad, but he was also my greatest teacher. So today I'll tell you some of the greatest things that he ever taught me. One of the biggest things that he taught me during our time together was to always live in the moment. Thinking back, one of the craziest things we've done is to buy an RV in the middle of a pandemic and go traveling across Canada. Our family always loved to travel, so it was nice to get to travel even when we shouldn't be traveling. As a lot of you may know, my dad always loved people and gatherings. Sometimes he seemed like the last person you'd ever think to be an entertainer, but in reality, he might have been the best entertainer I've ever known. He loved to party and have lots of company, especially on a Sunday evening after a long weekend of work at the ski hill when all you wanted to do was go to bed and sleep.
Yes.
Another big thing he taught me was to not be normal, and that's the definition of my dad, I think. He was never traditional, whether it was his style of cooking or the way he always tried to make our house different from anybody else's. Another not so traditional thing that he did was somehow wear the exact same shirt every day like it was okay. And I realized if that's what you wanted to do, then that's what you should do. Just make sure you wash it sometimes. I believe the biggest thing that he ever taught me was to be curious and never stop learning. He always had questions and never stopped talking when he was interested in something. He always wanted to know more. If he knew you were talking about, at least. Sometimes he'd ask you questions and he'd never understand what you were talking about, especially when it came to technology. One of his favorite things, or maybe his favorite thing, was cooking. And I believe that his favorite part about cooking was not the fact that he was good at it, but was the fact that he could never stop getting better. So moving forward, even though it was going to be tough with a G-sized hole missing in our family, here today, knowing I have an amazing family and seeing all you friends, I know my mom, Sky, and myself are going to be okay, as well as all of you.
Well, no DNA test required. That was G's dad and that was G's son. I do apologize for your introduction, Philip. Okay guys, party starts now. The food's going to be out in about 20 minutes, but let me just simply say this. Let's make ourselves a promise. Let this not be the last time G brings us together. In the weeks to come, you'll hear about something called the Red Hat Foundation. Yep. Not exactly sure what that means yet. We're working on it. But when it does emerge, we will be counting on all of you for your support to ensure that the love of the G brought this world lives on forever. So let's close with a toast. G. G, where we are. Thanks for everything. Thanks for calling me out when I needed it, although you could have been a bit softer in the words you chose. Thanks for bringing us all together once again. I know you're worried about Jules and Reese and Sky, but we got them. Here's to everything you live for. Here's to dropping the masks. Here's to friends. Here's to family. Here's to food. Here's to pints. Here's to more food. Here's to more pints. Here's to love. Here's to you, to Gareth, Douglas, Carter, G. Thank you all for being such a great audience. If you liked what we did up here, my name is Liam Scott. If you didn't like it, my name is Paul Keating. Thank you.